Is everything okay with the lighting, Terry?
He's at the disco.
This is like the Christmas lights, you know.
Yeah.
4 years ago.
Oh. Welcome everybody to the Sunday Roast, and we've got some excellent guests as usual on this week. And we're going to start off with Terry. Terry, please can you introduce yourself to the crowd?
Yes, I'm Terry Christian. I've been knocking around now for TV-wise 31 years, 32 years. You'll be able to see me on the Christmas Eve Bake Off. It's a Channel 4 40th anniversary special. That's what they said, you know. So it is the Great British Bake Off Celebrity Christmas Special. But when it comes to Christmas special, I can assure you, only one of those two words is true.
Are you going to be baking something, or are you going to be hosting?
No, baking.
Baking.
It's the 40th anniversary of the Great British Bake Off.
Terry, are you any good?
With cubes in it.
Are you any good?
Do you know what? I've always had to cook. You know, I had a very character-building childhood, so I'm not scared of the kitchen. But you know, I don't really like cakes, and I've always hated icing. You know, so and obviously one of the things that I always felt when watching Bake Off is some of those people have been practicing, and practicing is cheating, isn't it? Really? You know?
Yes.
So, Marina, are you any good at baking? Is that your forte?
I'm all right at baking. I've actually been on Come Dine With Me before, believe it or not.
Right, where'd you come in that?
Joint top, because of there was some very tactical voting. We should have won. There was couples Come Dine With Me, which is really awkward because it's with an ex who's a dickhead. Who now they're like reruns every now and then. And it's like, oh Christ, my husband loves it.
I came second and should have won, but I had to borrow some bloke's flat in London, and his fridge didn't work, and my pudding was champagne jelly. So they'd have been waiting for a fortnight for it to set.
And, that sounds like sabotage.
Exactly, and his oven didn't work properly. So even though the main course went down well, it took about half an hour longer to cook. But there you go. I did it with Diane Abbott, Wayne Sleep, and is it Danielle Lloyd, who was married to Jane O'Hara. And I mean, it was. I think I've still felt hungover on the Thursday. It was just drinking. That was all it was. Drinking.
And did they come to your home, Marina?
Yeah. And you know, it goes on until really late. Like it's like 2:00 in the morning. You're still going because they always like have to stop you and get you in a bedroom. That sounds dodgy. And get your like thoughts and then record it and then go back to the table. It takes forever, but it's good fun.
Blimey. Well, I think I was still waiting for the taxi at 3:30 in the morning at Wayne Sleep's house, but that was an evil night. That even had his own bar. You know, I thought this isn't good. Really, Diane Abbott, she got us pissed as well.
Well, she would. She likes opening a can on the train, doesn't she, Diane Abbott?
Well, that's all right. Don't we all? Or have we all at some point, you know?
Did you, with the Sicilian background, Marina, is there a bit of extra added pressure for you to be able to cook? Can you cook panettone, or is that?
Oh no, who's going to cook panettone? You just buy that from wherever. No, I'm not going to. That's like making your own pastry. Who's going to do that? It's a waste of time. I suppose it is an expectation. You make your own pastry. You've got too much time on your hands.
Maybe too much. I make my own Christmas cake every year. Marina, do you want to introduce yourself? I think you've already done that to an extent, but.
Okay. Well, I am. I suppose you call me a political commentator. Basically, always just slating the Tories and this government, which is shambles of a government, charlatans that we've got in charge. And I'm also co-host of podcast The Trawl, which is basically like Rest is Politics or News Agents, but we say the word bellend a lot.
Quite appropriate in this day and age. Max?
Hi, everyone. My name is Max. I run the Robespierre channel. I talk about British politics and Brexit in particular. And my wonderful co-host with a wonderful hat today, Alex, can you tell us about yourself?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm an author, I'm a historian, I'm a football coach, and a little bit of everything in between. And apparently I can also make a cake. So we're gonna go straight into this. Lady Moan? Is that what
Lady Moan, or Lady Colluder with the enemy, Lady Working Class Traitor. Absolutely.
Working class? Is that her background? I had no idea.
Very working class. Grew up in a tenement. Worst types of people.
What, working class or working class who become traitors?
No,
today?
the actual traitor, the scab class, as I call them.
That's pretty brutalistic, isn't it?
No,
or do you think
really,
it's fair enough?
With
Would that just be her, or is that other people?
I'd be on Robespierre's side. No, in the later era of Robespierre. I mean, what it is basically, you know, something like Michelle Mont, you know, she does well. What was she making? Knickers, wasn't she? Great.
Oh, she's Baroness Bra.
Yeah, well, so basically, yeah, underwear. That's what she made. She made her money. Then she's held up as if, you know, what she does is quite a normal thing in this country, which, of course, all the statistics from time immemorial tell you that there is no real rags to riches story in the UK. We've got the lowest rates of social mobility in the Western world, along with the USA. We just bang on about it a lot. So it's this sort of pipe dream. And then for her to kind of collude with the Tories who, you know, if she's seen, you know, and also she's Scottish as well. Bloody hell, you know, a Scottish Tory. Obviously, you've got your laird types. You've got certain Tory areas in Scotland, or you have had, you know, traditionally. But again, you know, somebody like her from Glasgow, and you know, she's not represented what those people that she grew up amongst represent. You know, it's a very strange one.
It's an interesting thing because I hear a lot of my friends' generation's parents say this, where they go, yeah, you'll vote Labour when you're younger, but when you get older, you'll switch to being a Tory because you'll have money and you want to avoid paying your taxes. And I'm like,
they just sound like bland middle class parents. No working class parent would say that to the kids. You know, I mean, it's one of these strange kind of myths, you know, about you know, even with Brexit, that the Brexit vote was working class, when in fact 60% of the Brexit vote was A, B, C1. Middle class, and in fact most of them were A1, B1s. I mean, you know, the real divide on the Brexit vote was old age pensioners. In the whole of the United Kingdom, 52% of the actual Leave vote came from the south of England, not the north. Very few people bothered to turn up and vote in the north. More people voted Leave just in Greater London than in the whole of the northeast.
My God.
Although London's held up as, you know, the Remain area. So there's a lot of myths knocking about, you know, about this idea of, you know, working class bigots and all the rest of it, where, you know, I can say, you know, growing up in a very working class area, very little bigotry. All the bigotry is a kind of subconscious bigotry that you get from people who've never met anyone black or never really met anyone Asian until they went away to university, didn't grow up in an area, didn't have like friends there, or either you know, just very, very odd. You know, they're kind of the subconscious racism in them is, you know, something to behold, really. So yeah, I mean, again, it's, you know, this idea of like you're all ideological. You know, when you're young, and then you become some, you know, sort of dyed in the wool Tory in old age. It just isn't true. I think it's just that the Tory old age pensioners tend to live longer, don't they?
I was the other way around, because like many moons ago, I used to read the Daily Mail, and I once voted Conservative. It was when I was younger, and you know, obviously a selfish dickhead. But as I've become more compassionate and more aware, and changed my reading habits, I wouldn't never dare go down that route again. But I think what's interesting as well is, so I'm working class background, but social mobility can have an interesting impact on some people. You can either go the way of remembering your roots and be like, no, I want people to have better than what I had. I don't want them to struggle like I had. Or you can go the other way, which is what we see a lot in the cabinet. We see people pulling up the ladder behind them. They don't care. It's a bit like, you know, they were all celebrating how there was so much diversity in the cabinet, for example, and actually it's not a win for diversity when the people that you're putting in these senior roles are actually using their positions of power to disadvantage those that come from the same backgrounds as them. It's tokenism, but it's not a win for diversity.
Well, I mean, when you look at Kwasi Kwarteng and Rishi Sunak, you know, it's not exactly, you know, like they pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, is it? You know, no. So it's
Nadine Zawari, yeah, you know. He only had how many cottages that he claimed expenses on? I don't remember how many it was.
Well, the stables as well, which was going to be a nice little segue later on.
But it was a huge failure of the 2010 Equalities Act was not to include socio-economic background. And when you think a lot of the issues of the UK have always been class-based, and we've always had this inept, tough class who aren't very good at what they do.
But you know what makes it worse?
And yet they run everything.
What makes it worse is that I think we're so deferential in this country. Like, we look at people wearing hats like what Max is wearing right now, and we assume that they're better than us. And if they speak posh, or if they went to a posh school, or if they've got money, it's like, oh, they must be better than. And I honestly, I thought that way till my 30s, probably my early 30s.
I always felt that was a Southern thing.
No.
It's a very English thing, and you never had it in places like Manchester and Liverpool. I mean, maybe it's an Irish thing where, there was enough serfdom in our background to put up with that. My dad was a trade union shop steward for 25 years in the Transport and General Workers Union. My mum moved from Dublin to Manchester in 1930, age 4. So she lived through all of that. And they remembered this stuff. And they were very well educated, politically. But most people were in those days. They're not now. And I do think, your working class Tories lived down south back in that kind of it. I mean, the weirdest thing is that 1979 election, had Labour won that, we could easily be a society like Germany now.
Yeah.
Where people had more money, there's a bit more, more equality. I mean, in fact, there was more equality anyway in the 70s than there is now. Everyone talks about, oh, it's terrible, it's the worst time since the 70s. In the 70s, as a kid under the age of 16, you could travel anywhere in Greater Manchester for 2p on the bus, right? You had a house, you had a council house or a council flat, you had somewhere to live. You didn't see people begging on the streets or homeless. All of these things came since Thatcher.
Yeah, it's what's
taking us
interesting
back
as well
to a kind of an American version of reality.
My mum and dad, so they're immigrants that came over from Sicily, and they work their bollocks off to get where they are. But my mum was a cleaner and a din lady. My dad was at a hospital, night porter, waiter, gardener. But they were still able back then to afford a terraced house in northwest London. Now, if you've got two people doing those jobs today, they're never affording that house. Never.
They can't afford the rent.
No,
they can't. I was looking at the stats today.
What Terry brought up there about class, I find it fascinating about, for example, here in Italy. So I'm for people who may be new to this, I'm not from Italy. I'm from Ireland, but I moved over here many moons ago. But something I noticed in Ireland and in Britain, and maybe in Ireland, it's Terry will know this as well. It's we try to emulate the British for some time. The accent you have is very important if you're looking for a job. So you can become a manager if you have the right accent. If you don't have the right accent, you'll remain where you are. Now, I hope things have changed over the last 20, 30 years. But in Britain, is it still the case? Because I've asked people here in Italy, and it's completely alien, this idea of what? The way you speak impacts the type of job you'll do.
They don't have a form of received pronunciation, and neither do the Germans. Every German state or area has its own accent. And, don't forget the so-called Queen's English and received pronunciation was actually invented, wasn't it, about 150 years ago? It didn't actually exist. They reckon the royal households, first of all, German was a main language in Victoria's household, and they reckon that Victoria probably spoke with a bit of a Cockney accent because the maids were Cockney. But it wasn't seen as anything. It only became meaningful when the new moneyed classes started competing with the aristocracy, and then they, this kind of strange brain noise, wah, wah, wah. Even if you went back to London 200 years ago, they'd have said Bath like a Lancastrian. They wouldn't have elongated the vowel and said Bath.
Putting on my historian hat here, I know during...
That's not a historian hat.
Should be. I know during the Napoleonic Wars, it was seen as a luck symbol to have someone they didn't want people from the rank and file. There's two reasons for that. One, because a lot of the rank and file were pulled out from prisons, and so they weren't seen as like the right sort. But there was also an element of having a member of the aristocracy as a form of luck, or a good sign within the army, which is nuts. But then there's also, going back all the way to William the Conqueror, they spoke French. And if you look back several generations, they spoke French. And if you look at the aristocracy that exists today, there's an element of using Latin languages instead of the Northern dialect. And the North generally they were pretty resistant to any of the changes down south. It wasn't really incorporated as much as it was. So I do wonder, that Latinese language, that accent, was there an impact within any of that as a result of the Norman conquest? Because you could easily go, right, you don't speak French, so you aren't getting access into this part of society. And until you learn French, you're not going to get access. But it also meant, because the education system was so limited, we can instantly tell that you're English or you haven't had the right upbringing. So it makes me wonder how much of that had an impact. So it's interesting to hear that you were about the pronunciations back in 200 years ago, and Queen Victoria having a Cockney accent.
Well, accents always change anyway, but it is this kind of, it's a strange marker. I mean, this is the whole thing with Brexit, was caused, I think, by a lot of the class system. It was like all these, middle class anti-Brexiters now, and I suppose I'm one of them, they didn't seem to give a shit that poor people were really suffering with austerity, and they didn't get on board and help them out in any kind of, meaningful way. And, Brexit came to bite everyone on the backside. And you can kind of say, well, it almost, I spoke to so many people at the time and said, well, how can things get worse? And I said, mate, having grown up as one of 6 kids, I can tell you things can always get worse. And how visceral elections were to me growing up was I used to panic in case Tories got in, from being even that 1970 election as a kid, because it would mean, the difference between you having to go on free school dinners or not being on free school dinners. If my dad lost his overtime, we were screwed, really. You know what I mean? My dad had to get overtime. And, it just wasn't good. It's a stress, it's a strain. It was a stress and a strain all the time. Poverty scars people really badly, and it goes deep.
Statistically, poverty increases the chance of crime happening, and it's proven. I could talk about Roe v. Wade having an impact as well. One of the things I was going to ask Marina, just on that note, Marina, what do you think it was that caused that shift? Because you said that you were reading the Daily Mail, and did you just stop reading it, or did you join a different social clique, or what do you think it was that changed it for you?
So Brexit opened my eyes, and I started looking for answers after Brexit happened, because it just felt so wrong. I couldn't understand how the electorate had voted to do it. And so I ended up naturally gravitating towards things like The Guardian, for example. And I'll tell you who was part of my radicalisation process: James O'Brien. He for me opened my eyes to an awful lot of just like the role the media plays, for example, and just the nature of the lying that goes on, the collusion that goes on, all the strings being pulled in the back end that we don't even see. And that for me was a journey. I switched over from Chris Moyles on Radio X to James O'Brien on LBC, and changed my life forever.
Wow. Well, I mean, he was very much a lone voice in the wilderness in many ways, because I couldn't believe how weak the media were. And whenever I turned up on anything, I remember going on Question Time, and I was treated absolutely abysmally, just for stating an opinion with facts. That was with Richard Tice.
2015, saying Brexit, leaving the EU is simple. Everything's simple when you're a bit simple.
All right, Claire Perry.
No. The reality is a 16% drop over here. It's going to cost you something ridiculous. Like, is it 1 in 6 jobs?
No.
The actual Great Recession of the 1930s was a 15% drop. You're saying rubbish. You're saying rubbish. Good luck with that one. Come and tell me how you're getting on in a few years' time or 16 months' time, because you seem to be very, very hopeful. I don't see any upside to it. So far, the pound's tanked by 15%. Is that a good sign that things are getting better?
In 15 years' time, you come
we've
and join the celebration.
We've got the lowest growth in the EU.
You come and join the celebration when we've got more manufacturing jobs in the northeast. We've got 3 ports. We've rebalanced the economy.
Based on what? Based on what findings?
Okay.
Is it based on that economist, Patrick Minford?
All right, let's
the
stop.
one who said there was a minimum wage.
It's getting boring. You're getting boring.
I mean, the ridiculous thing was, Richard Tice came on, and it was in Darlington, and it was the week that it come out about how much Brexit would actually damage our economy. It like cause that 4% slump, and especially in the northeast, an even worse one. And this question was brought up, and Richard Tice said, "Nonsense! Garbage in is garbage out." And I said, "Well, it's funny, but you're the guy, Richard, who said to us that leaving the EU would be simple." And he said, "Well, it is simple." I said, "Well, everything's simple if you're a bit simple." And of course,
Richard Tice.
He's just a nugget. But towards the end, it was quite funny. There was this woman, obviously this woman was going, "Well, we'll be able to make our own laws." I said, "Well, what law? What law don't you like that the EU have made you obey?" And then she just went red in the face. And then some guy went, well, it's typical of people like Terry and the media elites. Right? And I'm going, "I'm the elite." I said, "He's worth 500 million quid. That's his commercial property portfolio, most of it inherited. And here's me, one of 6 kids from a council estate, but I'm the media elite. Take a look at yourself, mate." But you see, it's kind of, if you show any real passion, if it's visceral to you, these shows are no good. I have this conversation a lot with, I don't know if you know Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, sociology professor. And she's from a little Nottinghamshire mining village. And she's really good, but she gets the same thing. You get on these programs, and I want to tear my hair out, because the kind of complacency you're surrounded by, and this weird kind of polite dinner party, where I've got to sit quiet while someone like Carol Malone speaks, and you're going, Jesus Christ! It's like somebody trod on an ant a million years ago and changed the course of history. That somebody like that even gets a platform. I worked with Anne Widdecombe. She's not a full shilling.
Can we bring in Marina on this, because Marina has had a similar experience on some shows that she's been on? Yes.
I've actually got Anne Widdecombe coming up on Jeremy Vine in a few weeks. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Why is she even being booked?
She's got an audience. She's got people that probably are quite loyal supporters of her, I'd imagine.
But she doesn't add anything to anything. I'm talking as somebody who's worked in the media for 41 years. I wouldn't have her on any show that I was a producer on, because certainly if I want to get some right-wing harriedom, there's going to be more intelligent, more interesting people.
On Strictly Come Dancing, when she was dragged around the dance floor.
I'd like to see her dragged around a few more dance floors, to be honest, but by our legs.
Richard Tice, though, is an interesting one. And this is the thing with him. So I've had him on The Table, which is my discussion show on Byline TV. And he puts out stuff there. So do you remember when we had the queues at the border going into France, and it was obviously all to do with Brexit? He put out a tweet that day, and it was like 4 different pictures of queues. It was like, this is nothing to do with Brexit. There have always been queues. And I brought this up during the filming, and I was like, you have purposefully, that's a strike day. This is a day when there was a faulty, all the machines went down or something. You know this, you're choosing to mislead your people. And because he's got this posh accent, everyone knows him as this well-to-do, he's done well, a multi-millionaire property tycoon or whatever he is.
He inherited it all.
Oh, no, really?
He's done well. So if you go into Manchester, that big city tower, his dad was an architect who actually built that, and then I think he actually owned it. So most of his stuff is inherited.
That doesn't surprise me, because I don't know if you saw recently, but I put out a tweet about a dishwasher. Did anyone see that one? Basically, I was speaking about a broken dishwasher that I had, that it was crap, and all the plates would come out dirty. But I've got no plan to repair it. I was just going to keep saying, make dishwasher work. Right. Now, everyone got it, except Richard Tice, but responded saying, gosh, Marina, I think you'll be blaming Brexit next. And it was like, it was an analogy for Brexit. So he might not be the sharpest knife in the
he's not. As I said, I did question time with him, and he wasn't. He's just another kind of, one of those posh grifter types.
Because I'm always off I'm in two minds about these people. Are they lying, or are they stupid? And I'm always of the idea that they're lying, that it's like a business, or that it's something you've bought into. And instead of actually coming out and saying, actually, I was wrong, because then you'd actually have to go away into the wilderness. That's why like Michael Gove and David Davis have never come out and said, actually, I was wrong, even though they have been wrong on every occasion. Because they bought it.
Both. I think it's a bit of both. It's a bit like Jacob Rees-Mogg has said so much nonsense, but I think he truly believed some of it, that we would have cheaper shoes and cheaper food and cheaper wine, and it all turned out to be bollocks. And even when he talks about, the signs in the Dartford Tunnel being one of the benefits from this bonfire of EU regs, I think he genuinely believes it.
I just think he's a moron.
Yeah.
And I think people, because they've got a posh accent, stick an accent like mine on Jacob Rees-Mogg and see what people say. It's just one of those strange things. I mean, mind you, I remember when I started doing the Word, and you didn't really hear northern accents on TV, not on those sort of groovy type shows anyway. And my boss said, well, I think the audience should probably get used to it. You know what I mean? I thought, a bit like if Vindaloo was your first taste of curry. I noticed. But again, people like Richard Tyson is that reassuringly posh. And it just strikes me as absolutely crazy. And I actually think that they must have some model of trying to make money. And a bit like the cigarette companies, when they knew for like years and years that cigarettes cause cancer, but they spent fortunes so they could keep making money as it went on. Delaying the inevitable day when we go, yes, they do cause cancer. Let's get rid of them. And a similar thing's happening with the fossil fuel companies now. They're just carrying on, aren't they? Keep making as much money as possible, knowing that it's destroying the planet. And then, of course, you've got your climate change deniers now. That Venn diagram, between the climate change deniers, your continuity Brexiters, your kind of
and
people obsessed with people on dinghies.
Meghan Markle, they're the same. They're all the same.
Yeah.
I've got a great stat for you for that topic, which is Brexit, according to the polls, is as hated as was the Vietnam War. And I said this last week. It's taken Brexit depending on how you want to look at it, between 6 and 2 years to achieve what it took the Vietnam War, arguably 15 years to achieve. And you're like, wow, this is nuts. Like you're worse than probably one of the biggest cultural shifts of the 1970s and 60s. Literally the paraphernalia that came out. I'm surprised that more movies haven't been made about this, but it's hard. The difference there is that the Vietnam War, you could read diaries, you could hear what people had to say. And over here, it seems to be like, it's in the background. It's like a dark presence, like the Emperor.
I think the
Star Wars.
The media, I mean, it's like something out of North Korea, the way they were about Brexit, trying to shut you up every time you bought it up, allowing airtime to people who've got no idea whatsoever. I mean, again, I'm not going to talk about a certain panel show, but the number of people I was thought, why have I even bothered doing any reading to be sat next to this individual? And it'd be like they weren't even very good guests. With Brexit, what it is a lot of people from within 3 weeks of that vote, they've been in a minority. I know so many people who voted Brexit had changed their mind within 3 weeks. Some did it just to stick the fingers up to David Cameron. Others did it genuinely believing that the NHS were going to get that 350 million a week, right? And they all just went quiet. Now, if there was another referendum, they either wouldn't have voted at all, or they'd have voted to put it all right. All you've got is these kind of, the sort of people who want to just annoy everybody. And that's it. If you ask them what are the benefits of Brexit, it says, well, it annoys people like you.
How is that a benefit?
It's just insane.
Like, yeah, we destroyed the economy, but at least it's pissing off, Terry. Like, how is that a benefit?
But there is another line, which is, and Richard Tice actually is one of the people that uses this line. It's that Brexit hasn't been allowed to flourish yet.
Well, it's nonsense,
this government haven't delivered the Brexit we wanted.
With run by the ERG and with their 80-seat majority. Yeah. And they've not been able to deliver it yet.
I know this. But it's also like, hang on a second. So I asked Richard Tice on this. I was like, pressed him, like, what would you do? What would you do? And it's all about like deregulation. I'm like, okay. Now talk to me about how we're going to deregulate even further, and you expect that we're going to be able to trade with the EU. They're going to just let our shitty substandard produce flow into their market. No fucking chance.
Well, he's one of these free port types, isn't he? He wants like the free ports. And also wants everybody to go into the office, seeing his £500 million property portfolio is mainly commercial property, so he doesn't like that.
No. It's about efficiency. People are more efficient if they work in the office. That's it. It's nothing to do with...
I am less efficient. I am so distracted when I go to the office. Everyone's chatting. There's free coffee. There's a fridge full of snacks. I can't concentrate now.
Well, yeah. Well, I think there's a whole kind of gamut of people who are, now going to be, that middle management looking over people's shoulders who have been proved that they're not necessary, to society.
Yeah.
Really.
And there's also the fact that I think a lot of the bosses don't want to be home with the family. I'll be that blunt. I don't think they want to be home, and they're like, well, I don't want to be home, and therefore I need an excuse. I need you in the office as an excuse for me not to be at home. I'll be that evil. I also get the impression the philosophy is very much dog eat dog. It's extreme capitalism. I just did a video on this. This deregulation crap that you keep saying. We already had the lowest regulations when we were in the EU. That's why people are coming over and investing in us. There are other reasons as well. But essentially, the impression I get is that they don't want a sheriff in town. They want a old school Wild West. Now, that was actually slightly fictionalized by the film industry. But that's it. Then he says deregulation. I don't want anyone going in and checking. And we've literally just seen, we had a kid 2 years ago die from pollution, from smog. That was the coroner's report. That was in London, I think in Southwark. And then we had another kid die, was it up in Manchester, from mould? And,
Rochdale, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, Rochdale, yeah.
This was a few years after the government voted against having minimum standards for landlords.
In Norway.
And Grenfell. Let's not forget Grenfell as well.
No, there's definitely not. And it's still up. The cladding's still up. They can't get it all down because no one wants to take responsibility because the businesses are going, well, you said we could put it up. And the government are going, well, we don't want to go backdate our regulations to deal with that. And we don't want to take culpability because if we do that, they'll look as if it's our fault. So basically, everyone's in danger because no one wants to take responsibility. And it's all because there isn't a sheriff.
It's going to be a big race to the bottom. That's all it's about, isn't it? Scrapping, making it. I don't even think they know what the outcome's going to be because they're going to end up producing stuff with no consumers because no one can afford to buy anything. People can't even afford to heat the homes. And, so they can impoverish everybody.
It was Jacob Rees-Mogg. I mean, it's also about a departure from rights. So workers' rights, for example. And obviously Jacob Rees-Mogg stood up in the House of Commons and talked about how paid sick leave, was it, or paid holiday shouldn't be like a given right. So these people, this is where they're going to squeeze every last bit out of their workforce to increase their profit margin. And this is why I hate when you get the average Joe, a working person going, it's about the freedom. It's about the free. They're going to you are going to remove. See all your protections removed. Do you understand this? Maternity leave, paternity leave, sick pay, and yet they've somehow, it's genius that the Tories have actually made them believe it's going to benefit them. Deregulation is only going to benefit the 0.01% different. You're a moron.
Yeah. I mean, they don't live in the real world. That's the reality. I mean, it's a bit like nurses. People are so stressed out at work. Teachers, nurses, are all taking early retirement or finding other avenues of work. Because if this is what I'm going to end up with at the end of the week,
how did they? Sorry. How did they convince people to go from clapping for the NHS to saying, well, they're lazy and they don't deserve a pay increase?
It's the eternal conservative story. Anyone in the public sector was always bone idle and overpaid, whether it was teachers, nurses, anybody who was in the public sector, were always, too easy for them. And again, it was to create that race to the bottom, I mean, the factories do it. They're all lazy, having a kip at work, anyone in a nationalised industry, they were lazy. Anybody, working in the NHS, they had, teachers, they had it too cushy, and now those jobs, nobody wants to do them. We've got no teachers anymore. We've got no nurses. A mate of mine was head of ACAS in Manchester. He was Irish descent, Pete Monaghan, and he was actually at a do where he had these NHS trust managers bragging about how they had only 3 nurses for something mad like 60 patients, and there should really be 11 or something like that, or 12. And he said, well, it sounds to me like a failure of recruitment. But these guys were bragging about making people's jobs really stressful because on paper they were saving money. And this is the state of this country now. It's like, it's just ridiculous.
You've done a nice segue there as well, because Zahawi had a really interesting interview where he got called up about, well, there's two parts to it. The first interview was obviously he got caught out like getting us to pay for his stable to be heated. And he said to, you might take this with a pinch of salt, you might not believe it or not. It basically went onto one bill and it was all together. But the bigger thing was he then said that he'd gone to the chief whip and he was told by the chief whip of the Tory party to take this money and to have it pay off his electrical bill. And I'm going, why is it okay for him to do that and not nurses to go, right, well, you guys pay for our gas and electric. You guys pay for our rent. Why is it okay for MPs to do that, but not nurses? And I've not heard anyone bring that up. But
I think nurses should pay their bills in applause.
Can I just introduce something? Really, I don't understand, and somebody can tell me why the hell this exists. Nurses and NHS staff have to pay parking. Why the fuck does that exist? Is there any other place where somebody has to go and pay their, like, Terry, when you were working at the BBC and you parked your car, did you have to pay to park your car in the car park?
No, absolutely not. But what happened is they kind of devolved the car parks, didn't they? Sold everything else, every bit of land, and a lot of the PFIs that bought in. So there's all sorts of stuff that's gone on in hospitals. But I mean, even if you want to pay for a car parking space, if you've got a Stepping Hill in Stockport, there's never any car parking spaces anyway.
Marina, when you're on Jeremy Vine's show, do you have to pay to park your car there? I don't know if you'd go by car, but
I'll get her a taxi.
I have a car.
Sorry, I'm not in London. That was a stupid question.
Yeah. No, it's appalling. I'm saying it's like they're trying to make these jobs as unappealing as possible, so less and less people apply for them. But you've got people like Keir Starmer saying that he doesn't want to recruit nurses from overseas. He wants this British-born workforce. Well, we haven't bloody got them available. There's no incentive to be a nurse. Who'd be a nurse? If my kids turned to me one day and said they wanted to do that job, I'd be like, are you sure? And also, we take the piss. Yes, they are vocational jobs, and these people, they're better than me because I wouldn't do that job. But we're taking the piss out of their goodwill here, and the fact that it is a vocation for them, and they do want to go into the job to care for people. But they're running on empty now. I've seen it. I had a kid 8 weeks ago, and I can see that they are so ridiculously stretched. You can see it, and I feel like we're getting into a very precarious position now, coupled with the strikes that are coming. Our healthcare is already very much a two-tier system, and we can talk all day about it being free at the point of access. But if you're waiting 6 hours for an ambulance or 12 hours in A&E, do we really have access to it at all?
Yes.
It's just ridiculous the way it's gone. And I mean, what's strange is when you hear ordinary people complaining about the strikes, and you're going, well, listen, this is how we got decent wages in the past. It was going on strike that created the middle class. Nobody said, well, you've all been good lads. Here, have a nice house and a living wage. Get yourself out of those slums. We feel so bad. I mean, if they had their way, we'd still have the slave trade, wouldn't we? That's the reality. I mean, one of the main reasons they got rid of that was they thought, well, actually, paying them a low wage is cheaper than having them as slaves, and we've got to feed them and keep them alive.
Well, it's no different to the Industrial Revolution. The guys who developed the first big factory up north, but they were writing into Parliament going, can you not bring in regulations? It was fine as it was. We don't need these regulations. We don't need standardization. We don't need rules. We don't need inspectors coming in and checking what we're doing. At the same time, they were deliberate, and they claimed they were Christian. That was another big thing, which I found really, although within Christianity, they talk about slavery being a norm, especially for women and daughters, and being able to sell them into slavery. So, maybe that isn't too far-fetched, but deliberately getting people from orphanages and then making sure that they stayed on until they were 18. Sometimes they were actually changing the birth certificate so they could stay for an extra year. And then on top of that, if you were particularly badly behaved, they'd lock you up in these special rooms that they had upstairs, where you would have no mattress, you'd have a window, and you'd just be left up there for 2 days with no toilet, nothing. And it's almost identical. It's perfect that we're talking about Christmas right now, because I don't think there's any Christmas spirit in the Tory party or the Reform Party. You mentioned Richard Tice earlier. I'll end on this. I literally listened to him talk on a debating show. I can't remember which one. And on the one hand, he was saying how carers need to be supported. And he then goes on to say that within the commercial sector, when you need better workers, you pay more. And then in the next step, he was saying how it was important that the government reduce the tax burden. And you're like, well, we need more money to pay them. How do you think that's going to happen? Like, you've got to pay more taxes. So it just blew my mind that no one pulled him up on it, because he is thick. He must be to say stuff like that. How can he literally give the basic format of commercialism and not realize that it's almost applicable in many, many respects to how government works? You can't magic up brand new money.
Because I will say, the people he's talking to, Alex, the people who are going to be supporting the reform, I don't think they're going to be able to see the hypocrisy of the point he's making. It will just sound pretty good, and they'll agree.
They just don't get it. I mean, I have conversations with these people, and they go round in circles, and they go, yeah, but why are they all going on strike? And you say, well, this, that, and the other. And then if they get more money, you might get more money. You know, they can't afford to live. You don't want the whole NHS to crumble, or your transport. And they go, yeah, but why are they going on strike? And you're going, haven't we just had this conversation? You know, it's like when someone says, why are they always coming over here on dinghies? You go, well, they don't all come over here, mate. You know, most of them go to France, Germany, other places. And, you know, there's various reasons. They speak English. We've got the most lax labour laws in the Northern Europe, so they can always disappear into a black market here, or they've got family here. I said, that's it. Yeah, but why are they all coming over here? And you're going,
they're not.
How?
But for the ones who are against the strikers, my question is, okay, what should the people on strike do instead of going on strike? Give us some ideas of what they can do. So they want more, they want higher wages, they want better working conditions. Okay, you don't like them going on strike. They don't want to go on strike. They're pushed to these extremes. What's the alternative? Tell us the alternative.
They just need to get a second job as a consultant with Deloitte or something, for goodness sake.
It was James O'Brien. I think it was James O'Brien said that about, you know, the people who are complaining about having to pay for the VAT on private school fees. Well, why don't the parents just go and get a second job? Yeah. Instead of complaining about that.
Yeah, get rid of the flat screen televisions and the mobile phones. That's it. Cancel the Netflix subscription.
Go and get a box and live in a puddle.
I know. I'm always like, people have a go at poor people if they spend their money on booze and fags. I'm like, if you've got nothing else, let them enjoy their booze and fags, for goodness sake. What else are they supposed to do?
It's always been open season on people who are poor, or the so-called working classes in the UK, and that's just the way it is. You know, I mean, it's quite, as I said, even the spin with Brexit, where that's being, you know, blamed on working class people. You go, no, it's middle class people. It's loads of old age pensioners living in those seaside towns on the south coast
who have a second home in Spain or in Italy.
Yeah, when they've never seen an immigrant. I mean, I've had them round here. You know, I'm in, like, you know, Cheshire, and there's some old dear not an old dear, she's the same age as me. I suppose that is an old dear nowadays, and she was going on about people in dinghies and saying the only brown people round here work in the Indian restaurant. You know, there's no dinghies coming up the River Boyne. You know what I mean? So what are you bothered about dinghies for? And also, when you meet refugees, I've interviewed and met loads of them, especially the Syrians, very highly qualified accountants, pharmacists, doctors, you know, all sorts of stuff. Again, they're not what people think they are. And, you know, so you get... And also, didn't Labour send 68,000 home in there last year? You know, they processed them and 68,000 didn't qualify and got shipped out. The Tories, Cruella Braverman, they've sent, I think, 8,000 back in the last year. So these things don't tally up. And yet, if you say all that, they go, yeah, but why are they all coming here? Drive me mad. I hate them, you know. Why are they all coming here?
Have you ever been tempted to say, when people say that, the follow-up question of, is Britain great? and just see if they can
I
process
haven't really
the two.
I haven't really got that kind of patience. Do you know what I mean? I'm more likely to get down in the gutter with them. Do you know when James O'Brien gives away his middle class twattery, especially is when he goes, about having sympathy for them. You know what I mean?
Compassion for the conned.
Empathy for the conned, and I'm going, fuck you, right? Pardon my French. Forget that.
Free siege.
Forget that. You need to get down in the gutter with these people. I grew up around these idiots. I mean, this is what social media has done. It's given every idiot in the pub a loud hailer. So the guys that say stuff in the pub and you go, all right, mate, you have a good night, or everyone have a good chuckle, are now out in force.
But there is a good and bad point to that. But Marina, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I actually had compassion for the people that voted Brexit and just believed all the crap. But if you still support Brexit now, my compassion is gone. No more.
I have a mixture of pity and contempt. And it depends on what mood I'm in. Because I'm easily triggered. I had a very difficult childhood. So my inner 14-year-old chimp does start jumping from time to time.
Does it make a difference that it's Christmas?
Not really. You know what I mean? I had very bad experiences as a kid at Christmas, so I get very triggered about it at times.
Also, Christmas is when families come together and they have the Brexit conversation over that turkey.
Well, I mean, luckily for us, nobody in my family, none of my mates, I don't actually know anybody, who's a close associate of mine who voted Brexit. And yet they're nearly all working class, although most are also Irish descent as well. So I suppose they would they?
No.
Get that magic passport, the passport to freedom.
What would you have done, Terry, if your parents had voted for Brexit?
Well, I mean, mine are both dead, so they wouldn't have done that. So, I mean, again, I just don't.
Just a hypothetical, because some people have had to deal with this. Because, as you said earlier, it's generational. Would it have changed anything or not?
No, they just told them they were stupid. It's like asking me what did your parents had voted Tory. It was never going to happen. I mean, my mum went mad at me for voting tactically Liberal, Lib Dem in 2010. You know what I mean? She went back, she said the just Tories. And then the guy that I voted for, who was a Lib Dem, voted with the coalition government on everything. Bedroom tax, every horrible Tory policy you can imagine. I thought, oh God, my mum was right. God rest her soul. Got to see the traitors for who they are.
Marina, what would you have done if your parents had voted? I appreciate that it's extremely unlikely after telling us your background, but what would you have done anything? Would you be like Terry or this is a very interesting question.
I would have obviously been horrified. I think I would have I like to think I would have got in quick and it would never have happened because I would have asked them beforehand, but what are your thoughts? And then I would have done a James O'Brien style takedown explaining why it was a ridiculous thing to do.
Well, I mean, it was one of those strange things because I didn't know much about I just thought, well, I can't see any of our domestic problems being the fault of the EU. And I was already aware that Blair had maybe let too many EU migrant workers in. But then we needed those workers, and the little bit of growth we had wasn't from any kind of great investment in productivity. It was just from having those arms and legs over it. And without them, there's nothing.
Max?
Well, obviously it wouldn't have happened, but I think I think. No, well, my dad maybe, my mum no, but I would have asked, why did you vote for this? Because you'd have to give me a reason. And if it was, well, I thought things were going to get better, okay, but they're not. And I'm not angry with people, and I understand some people were, they voted to give the Tories a bloody nose. Some people honestly thought things would get better. They were looking at, and people were drip fed, this type of idea that, look, everything is bad because of the EU, and it happens not just it happened not just in Britain, it's also happening in Europe as well. The government, it's an easy scapegoat. Oh, look, we the roads are all broken. Well, it's because of the EU. Oh, we can't do X. It's because of the EU. And it's very easy for governments who have nothing to show just to blame the EU. And of course, in Britain, I think for 20 years. And this is something I've talked about maybe on the previous live stream or on the previous, Sunday roast, was about how if you look at countries around Europe and Britain before Brexit, Britain was probably one of the only countries where you didn't have the Union flag and the EU flag when the Prime Minister was speaking or a minister was speaking. If you look at any interview with an Irish politician or a French politician, Italian, you'll see behind them, it doesn't matter what party they're from, they'll have the European flag and they'll have the national flag. In Britain, it wasn't the case. And I think there was, a constant drip of EU is bad, Europe is bad. Migrants coming in from Europe are taking jobs, they're driving down wages or they're driving up wages for businesses. I understand a lot of people voted to make things better, but you can't continue to believe that, considering the damage that's been done. And I think it's important that whoever did vote didn't vote for the Tories after that, because once you realise this is shit, how the hell can you vote for Boris Johnson or Boris Johnson was the only one people could vote for. They couldn't vote for they couldn't vote for Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss because they didn't have the choice. Why aren't you on GB? Why aren't you on Good Morning Britain instead of Martin Lewis giving advice to people?
No. I mean, listen. I've been in the media for years, so I've been around long enough to know it's not what you do, how you do, it's where you're from. You go in that room. What the hell are you doing here? I mean, unfortunately for me, northern accents weren't trendy when I first started, but Manchester became trendy for a year, and that's how I ended up getting the gig on The Word.
That is the role of dad, though, isn't it? His dad just gets taken advantage of, doesn't he?
No, not this one. Do you know how much my lad at Sheffield University gets off me a month?
Go on.
50 quid. And don't spend it all at once.
Oh my god!
And he's so scared to ask me for money. He's just borrowed 150 quid off his older brother.
No. Is that a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out.
Considering where my kids grew up, that's a good thing, because I've seen, it's this idea that you get. I mean, I suppose it's me, just kind of making them do something. They'll do fuck all otherwise, and that's the reality. Because they'll end up like the mates.
Scrimp and scrape through the university days. Yeah, my dad's quite similar. My dad's from up north as well. I used to go up to the Edinburgh Festival for the Fringe. We used to put on a show with a few mates for stand-up called the Free Beer Show. And one year I went to him and said, look, I haven't got my paycheck. Can you loan me 100? I never asked him for money during uni.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, yeah, that's fine. I'll lend you 100. Just make sure you pay me back when you can. And I was like, yeah, sure. And then I got up and I used the money to pay my rent to stay up there. And about 2 days later, my check came through my payment came through from work. So I sent him the money via bank transfer. And then the following morning, I got a knock on the door from some mates. And they were like, got to talk about that money you gave us. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, it's fake. I went, no, it's not. It's not fake. And he was like, yeah, it's fake. And he showed me, and actually it was awful fake. It wasn't even funny fake. It was funny, awful fake. It was literally, the notes were peeling off in half. I just hadn't checked because he handed me the bundle. So I was like, shit, where am I going to get 100 quid from to pay him? Because I'm already on a tight budget. So I rang up my dad and went, hey, there was a problem with that money. He said, it's fake, isn't it? And I said, yeah. I said, how do you know that? He said, well, that'll teach you not to fucking check your money in the future.
Oh, I wouldn't be that mean.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just thinking of what Alex was saying earlier about the fake money. Can you imagine if you had, tried to use it in the supermarket or something. Alex, I was just thinking of the money earlier on. If you had used it in the supermarket, you could have been arrested.
Yeah.
And you'd be calling your dad.
Yeah.
I'm calling from the police station.
He hung up. He hung up and he wouldn't pick up. He just hung up the phone. He didn't want to know because he was disappointed that I hadn't checked.
I mean, I only ever borrowed 40 quid off my dad. And it would be, so yesterday was the 41st anniversary of me starting in the media, age 21, working for BBC Radio Derby. And I got in there and it was £100 a week. And I panicked. I went down to Derby, having borrowed 40 quid off my dad with 2 weeks worth of dole money. Whereas normally I would have had to give my mum, a third of that. And got down there and then panicked when they told me that they'd only be paying me at the end of the month. So they made a special dispensation for me to pay me every week. And as soon as I came back to Manchester on December the 23rd for Christmas, my dad said, "Where's that 40 quid? Hey, Dubliner." You know what I mean? That's what they're like.
Thanks a lot.
It was quite funny. Lawrence Fox, right? Loza Fox. So I'd put something, there was something about the Battle of Britain, and it just kept being shown on BBC News all the time. So I thought, is there any other country in the world that goes on about a war that finished like 75 years ago? And he went and did one of those, where they quote you, go above you. He said, typical of Terry Christian, what is it? My grandfather was shot and wounded in World War II, so that people like Terry could spout his, his inane, views. And I put, a shame he wasn't shot in the bollocks. My best Twitter moment.
Oh.
How many likes, how many retweets for that one?
Oh, there was a lot, Hey, he didn't block me, though. God bless him. But then again, he didn't realise that there were Sikhs in World War One.
Yeah, he's a moron. There was a great moment at the London mayoral election as well when you aware of the influencer Nico on YouTube, a YouTube influencer called Nico?
No. I'm 62. What would I know?
You'd be surprised. He came 5th in the mayoral election. He's a YouTube influencer. That's it. There's no political backing. Claimed that he only spent 5k on the actual thing, but he beat Loza Fox and literally then trolled him.
Loza Fox did not like me. Welcome back. Welcome back, my friend. I don't think he likes me.
Fucking priceless.
But poor Lawrence Fox was burning because he lost to me. That poor man. Unlucky, my friend.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. 5th place is mine.
Good one.
Absolutely. You could see Loza's face just being like anger, didn't want to talk to him, totally avoided him. It was, that was.
It must be something about.
Felt good.
Must be something.
You're not going to believe this either, but we're out.
Oh,
yeah, cool. Terrifying.
But on that note, thank you very much, everyone.